All right, today we're going to be digging into a carburetor on a mid-90s Honda 300 Fourtrax. This carburetor is going to be the same on late 80s, all of the 90s, and some of the early 2000 Fourtrax 300 four-wheeler, two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. So we got the carburetor off here, obviously. To do a good job of cleaning, you want to take it off of the four-wheeler. Some guys try to turn it in there, and you can clean it that way, just not very well. First things, obviously we have it off the four-wheeler, so we have this throttle cable already pulled off, but the throttle cable comes in this top cap here and goes into this housing. Plastic cover, and it's just held on by one screw. And then going back together, you want to make sure that this is, and I'll show you that when we pull it apart here, but this is Phillips screw here, this cap, and it kind of tucks down into this tab here. So our throttle cable comes in here, kind of wraps around this part of the butterfly here, and when you pull the throttle, push the throttle, it pulls this up, opening this butterfly. So when you pull the throttle, it opens this butterfly, pulling more air through, sucking more fuel through. So when you're adjusting the idle, all you're doing is actually opening this butterfly. So you can't see it because it's very small adjustments, but turn that clockwise, so turning that in would turn your idle up. And you want to make sure that your four-wheeler is 100% warmed up before you start adjusting your idle there. Turn it down, you turn it counterclockwise. You want to do like an eighth or a quarter turn at a time. You don't need to do any more than that. Here's a primer plug here, and what you do, you just pull on this, push on this one. It's got a diaphragm inside there, and it sucks fuel down into this carburetor if fuel's having a hard time getting down in there. But most of the time you don't ever have to mess with this. Your choke will do the job for you. And we've got the choke that comes in here, and I don't have that cable handy, but choke, plunger, and a cap with a spring on it goes down inside here, and that just slides out. It's like a 12 or a 14 millimeter plastic nut or a cap that goes on here. So that's the choke. Now to clean this carburetor and do a good job at it, you want to pull these 4 Phillips screws that are on the bottom. If your four-wheeler's been sitting over the winter, or it's been you got some sand in the fuel, or just anything at all, it can plug these jets up and cause your four-wheeler not to start or not to run good. So 4 Phillips screws there, pull your bottom bowl off here, and this is what you call the bowl. Here's a rubber O-ring here. When your four-wheeler, if it's dripping fuel out the bottom, or while you're hauling it on a trailer in the back of the pickup, fuel will slosh around in your carburetor there, which is fine, but you'll have a little bit of fuel go up down into this tube here, and it'll actually come out this bottom tab. Another thing you can do, just real quick, take a flat screwdriver and unscrew this. A couple turns out and fuel will start to drain out of this bottom tab here. You want to make sure that you've got a hose connected to this that goes beneath the four-wheeler. You want to make sure that this hose runs underneath that motor and not on top of that motor. If your four-wheeler's hot, start dripping fuel, it could start a fire, or at least discolor your motor, causing it to look pretty rough shape. So we've got the bottom bowl off here. A lot of times debris will sit down in here, so you want to make sure you clean that really good. I like to use gum out carbon choke cleaner. It works the best for me, I feel like, and then compressed air too. If you want to use compressed air, spray it out like that, and that does a good job of cleaning it out after you soak it with carbon choke cleaner. If your carb is really bad, a lot of times you can either soak it in fuel, which doesn't work quite as good as soaking it in some kind of carbon choke cleaner. That does the best job. We've got this cap here. You want to make special note of how it is sitting right now. That is how you're going to put it back together. And so we're just going to set that there. And we've got your main jet here and your pilot jet under here. And I'll show you another jet that a lot of people missed. But your main jet here, take a flat screwdriver and need actually a little bit bigger screwdriver, but pull this one out. This is going to be a 120 size jet. So you take compressed air, you blow through it, you take carbon choke cleaner, you blow through it. You want to make sure that when you hold this up to light, you can see through it clearly. And it's a pretty small hole, but of the 3 jets, this main jet is the largest port there. So you'll be able to see through that if you hold it up to light. Now your pilot jet is going to be here. And that pilot jet sits kind of down underneath there a little bit harder, so it's a little bit harder to get to. You want to make sure your screwdriver is seated really well before you start taking this out, so you don't round this off, strip that head off of there. So there's your pilot jet here. This one's going to be a 42 pilot jet, and for my altitude, my riding conditions, 42 is where it needs to be. Depending on your altitude, riding conditions, what's done to the four-wheeler, performance-wise, you may want to switch that out. So your pilot jet is what your four-wheeler uses to start the four-wheeler. So if you've got a piece of sand in, and it is the smallest ported jet on this carburetor, so you want to make sure if you've got sand or bad fuel in there, your pilot jet will get plugged up. Your only way to start it may be to use that choke, and then you have to sit there and have that choke on the whole time. So you want to make sure that that pilot jet is cleaned out before you continue to start. You're going to starve that four-wheeler for fuel. So to get this pin out here, to take our needle and seat off, take a small screwdriver, a pick or something, just to kind of push down there, and might have to use a smaller one yet. But if you can, well, this isn't any smaller. Anything to get that out. Now, a lot of times that will stick, and you've got to use a little bit more force to get it out. You want to be very careful. You want to be very careful you don't break these posts off. These posts are aluminum posts, and they break very easily. So take, if you can't get it out, what I do is I support this tab here, and we'll put a block or something in behind it, take a screwdriver, and just kind of tap it so that this pin will come out. You want to make sure that you don't push it too hard though, then that pin just slides out of there. Now you get your float assembly here, and this is what they call the needle and the seat. So if somebody says your needle and seat is probably leaking, they're talking about these two parts here. Now on this four-wheeler, the Fourtrax, the seat is not replaceable. So your needle is the only thing that you can replace. This needle comes off of there, just slides off, and a lot of times these get grooved or debris gets stuck in here. Fuel comes in this port here, runs through your carburetor, comes out here, and when your throttle opens up, when your float opens up, debris can get stuck in between the seat and the needle and causing fuel to continuously flow. And then that is when your carburetor fills up with fuel. Instead of dumping into your motor, you want that fuel to come out this tab here. So you want to make sure this is always cleared out. But also, if your needle gets stuck open, you want to figure out why it's getting stuck open. Now that jet that I was talking about, you can pull this black cap off here. It's just a little rubber cap, but you're not going to be able to get down into your jet that way. There's nothing to pull out this way. This jet here comes in from the side, and you pull it out the same way, just flat screwdriver. And it's a small jet, but actually the port size on this one, I'm gonna need a little bit bigger screwdriver. Oh, there we go. The port size on this is an 85, so it's actually a touch bigger than your pilot jet. So if you're cleaning it out using little wires to clean it out, make sure that you're using a big enough wire to clean this out to make sure that it's free and clear. So we've got your main jet holder here, and this can come out too. I believe that's a 6mm or an 8mm, and you can just pull that out, and it is ½ inch long or so. Make sure that's clean, but that's a very large port, and if your main jet's cleaned out, more than likely your main jet holder is going to be cleaned out. You can also spray air down through there. Now you want to make sure that when you're doing that, you want to be careful, because if you haven't pulled this top cap off here, you could blow that needle and spring and cap up into your top area there, and that's going to give you some problems. So now we're going to do 4 Phillips screws to pull this top cap off, and there's a diaphragm underneath here, and you want to make sure that diaphragm is not leaking or pinched. And real quick, while I've got this on there, I'm going to show you how you can test this. Now, this isn't a completely foolproof test, but it'll show you if your diaphragm's in good condition or not. You take compressed air, blow it in this port here, and you see your slide go up and down. Now, if you've got a small leak in your diaphragm, it's still going to go up and down, and you want to make sure you replace that diaphragm. Don't just do that test assuming that your diaphragm is good. So pull these 4 Phillips screws off here, and these are going to be a smaller screw than what was down below. So if you get them mixed up, you'll know just these are shorter screws. So same thread pitch and everything, but different, just a little bit shorter screws. There's 4 of these. You know, make sure that going back together, you don't have to really wrench on them. They're going into an aluminum carburetor, so I like to keep my finger on top there while I disassemble this. And we've got your spring, your cap there, and your diaphragm. Now this your diaphragm is the rubber part of it, your slide is the rest of it here. And then we've got your needle sitting down underneath there. We also have a cap right there. If you want to replace your needle, you can't just push that needle up. You've got to take and actually spin this cap off of there. I believe it's about a 1/4 turn. And then you're able to push that cap up. That cap there, there's a spring underneath there that'll hold that needle. And this needle is adjustable. And you can see down in there, their needle, this one's second slot from the bottom is where that needle is. And then there's also a washer down below here. You know, make sure that goes in that order back together. So a lot of times what I do, slide that washer on and then put it back in my slide there. And that's back on. Drop this down in there and you can kind of see which direction that goes down in there. And it has to be perfectly straight or it's not going to go down there very well. And then you can just kind of give it a little bit of force to get it down where it needs to go, and then a 1/4 turn. 1/4 turn to tighten it up. So now your needle will not come out. Put your spring, now what I do, inspect this, make sure it's in good condition. And then what I do, if you've got fuel or carb cleaner on it, a lot of times it expands. Or if it gets dried out or something, it'll contract and it'll be very difficult to get on there. So I take and put it in that position there. I take my finger, put it underneath here, and then there's a tab right there that you line up, and you want this to seat very, very well. You want to make sure that your needle goes down into the main jet holder there, and then I like to hold this up about a finger's width, and that keeps that diaphragm right into place there. Take this spring, and that's why you got to keep your finger underneath there, otherwise it'll slide out of place or push down farther. Take that cap then, set it on there. A lot of times you can feel it if it seats properly. You can look at it, and if there's any kind of gap at all, it's obviously not seated properly. So go ahead and take those screws in, keeping pressure on that top cap, otherwise that spring will force that cap back off and you've got to reset that diaphragm. And then one more screw there to start. We'll take, and as soon as you get 2 or 3 of these tightened down, we can take our finger off the top here if we need. And then we'll snug those up, but first we'll flip this carburetor over. We'll get your main jet, which again is your larger jet, so that's going to be the 120. It goes right into this main jet holder. Let's put that on there. Now we've got the jet coming in from the side here. This is the 85. And again, depending on riding condition and altitude and stuff like that, we can switch this out. Get that one started. We'll take our flat screwdriver here, tighten it up. You want to make sure that these are tight, because when your carburetor's sitting upside down, those have a tendency to kind of walk themselves out. So you don't have to really wrench on them, but you want to make sure that they're snug. And then don't forget our rubber cap. Let's see. It's going to sit down in there like that. Our needle is going to slide in that groove there. We're going to hold it that way so it doesn't fall off. I'm going to remove this for now. Then you can just set it down in there like so. Take our needle then, run it through there, through these tabs here. And you want to make sure that that moves up and down freely. Make sure this is in the right position there. We got that. And then we can take our bowl here, make sure that O-ring is good, slide it back down on top. If your pin is not where it needs to be in there, it will cause this cap not to go down as far as it needs to go. So you want to make sure that that's in the correct position. Now I've got one more thing to go over, and that'll be the end of this video on this Honda Fourtrax 300. We've got the air fuel screw, and that is located right here. Now the way that you see, you'll see a measurement, and you'll say 2.5 turns out or 2 1/4. I believe this one on this model is supposed to be 2 1/4. So the way you test that, You put your screwdriver in there, you turn, what I do is half turn, 1 full turn, 1.5, 2. So this was right at 2 turns. Now what you're able to do is pull that completely out, inspect it, clean it, do what you got to do, but then you want to take it all the way till it's seated. You want to take it the same number of turns out. Half, 1.5, 2. This is spring loaded with a washer on there to keep that screw from rocking out, as long as you keep it under a couple turns out, which is where you need to be anyways.